everyone, and welcome. I'm Scott from Blue Circle Health. I've lived with type 1 diabetes for over 45 years, and I'm just so glad you could join us today for our webinar. We're thrilled to be here alongside our partners, the Diabetes Link, Diamyd, and Diversity in Diabetes, to have an open, informative conversation about understanding clinical trials in type 1 diabetes. Clinical trials are an important part of how new treatments, technologies, and insights are developed in the T1D community, but they can also feel a little complicated, maybe even a little bit intimidating to understand. And our goal today is to inform and empower you to feel more comfortable on clinical trials in general. Now, participating in clinical trials, it's a very personal thing, and I promise you today you will not be persuaded or pressured in any way. Throughout this session, we're going to talk about what clinical trials are and how they work, how to find and evaluate available studies, and how organizations like those here today are working to make information about research more accessible and inclusive. We want everyone to leave this session feeling better equipped to ask questions, to seek trusted sources, and really make your own informed choices. So that being said, we're only scratching the surface on this topic today. So if you would like us to dive deeper into this, we're happy to do so in a part 2 in the future. Just let us know. Now, before we get going too far, I do need to cover some quick housekeeping items, and then we'll do some brief introductions. So we welcome and encourage you to use the chat feature along the way. I'll keep an eye on it throughout the presentation, and if you need anything during the session, just let us know there. A few more things that I do have to mention. This session is being recorded. Participation in this event is completely voluntary and may reveal your identity and any identifying information that you share with other group participants. So, for example, comments in the chat and during discussions. We are not providing medical advice, individual or otherwise, and may refer you back to your healthcare team for detailed and individualized care. And then finally, for anyone who's not familiar with Blue Circle Health, stick around till the end and I'll share a brief overview and answer any questions that you have. So again, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any point, and I will pop in and share those with the speakers as time allows. And I do expect that we're going to have a lot of questions today, so we'll get to as many as we can. Finally, I would like to just thank our partners and all of you for being here. We know that progress in type 1 diabetes takes collaboration, conversation, and community, and that's what today is all about. All right, well, thanks for your patience with all of that. Let's get started with some quick introductions, and if you'd also share how you're connected to type 1 diabetes. And Mary Jane, let's start with you.
You got it. Hi. Oh, I froze. I'm Mary Jane. I am the education manager at the Diabetes Link. And I have had type 1 for almost 8 years. My anniversary is next month. So I have that lived experience, and now I'm working in the field, which is awesome.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here, and happy early anniversary.
Thank
All
you.
right, then, Grace and Jordan, will you guys also introduce yourselves too?
I'll go first. So I'm Grace Silverio. I am proud to be here representing diversity in diabetes as a board member and longtime volunteer. In my day job, I serve as the Director of Solution Strategy for Chronic Conditions at Teladoc Health, and I'm also a registered nurse by background and a certified diabetes care and education specialist.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jordan Major. I am currently a PhD student at the University of Florida. I'm also an occupational therapist. Again, what I currently do is now I'm studying maternal health and type 1 diabetes. A lot of that is from my own personal experience. I have lived with type 1 for 32 years. I just celebrated my 32nd anniversary last week. So, Mary Jane, you and we've got a little alignment there. But But yeah, I'm super excited to be here, partnering with Diversity and Diabetes and Grace and all the folks over there. So yeah, just happy to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you as well, and happy belated Diversity. And Grace, I have to mention, my mom was a career nurse, and so I have a lot of love for nurses in general. So we're thrilled to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Elna, how about you?
Yes, well, I'm also a nurse, guys, and I go back in maternal child health, and my beginning was high-risk pregnancies, then diabetes in pregnancy and gestational diabetes, and then my daughter got type 1. Wow. And I thought that I knew about type 1. I used to wonder how in the world lay people could understand, dawn phenomena and understand everything else. So that was I really woke up and I became a CES, diabetes educator as well, and became very involved in research. First thing I did is take off 3 months from working and look for trials to save her beta cells, because that's what I was told by somebody heading up diabetes at NIH, which is near me. I'm in the DC area. So that got my interest in research, and I've been interested in type 1 research ever since, and that was 25 years ago. So speaking of anniversaries, my daughter's was last month, her 25th.
Amazing. Oh,
Yeah. So very important to me, and I work with Diamyd Medical, and we've been doing things for new onset type 1.
Yeah, and I've had the privilege and pleasure of meeting your daughter, and she is a gem. So yeah, well, and that's a perfect segue, Elna. Why don't we? I'm going to bring up your slides, and we'll let you kind of kick off our discussion here.
You guys, I will, because it's a topic that's I'm very passionate about, and I really want people to understand about trials. So I've got this first slide for you of phases of clinical trials. So there's preclinical, phase 1, 2, 3, which you hear about most often, and then actually phase 4 as well. Preclinical, it's really encompasses all the research activities that go on before a trial. It can take many years. So you're talking about from lab and animal testing and whatever else, and just these were amazing researchers in a lab who get an idea and then develop a hypothesis. So a lot goes into this, and this is where you hear about from bench to bedside. So we go to bedside was phase 1, and each of these increases with the number of people you have. So for phase 1, it's a very small group. It may be 20 to 100 people. You're really checking for safety, dosage, the best way to administer it. You go to phase 2, gets bigger, maybe 100 to 300 people. You can see where it says here again, safety, dosage, you're doing more on that with a larger group. And then you start into effectiveness and the different methods and ways to give it. And really just to see, does this treatment work? They won't go beyond phase 1 or phase 2 if it's not working well. It's great when you get into phase 3. Not all studies even make it to phase 3. We're a phase 3 study now at Diamyd with the Diagno 3 study. We were a phase 3 study that I worked on many years ago, and that's always exciting because the next step is going to market. So phase 3, you're anywhere from 300 to 3,000 people, depending on how small the company is and sponsor behind it and a number of different things. You think of the ones for vaccines or COVID or others, those have been huge, and the bigger pharma companies have larger global trials. But it can go anywhere from 300 to basically many times, as long as somebody gets 300 or 330 in there, they're happy, but it can go up to 3,000. So large scale, you're confirming the efficacy that it works and continuing to compare it to the other treatments that are out there. You have to be able to prove that this is at least comparable, if not better, in order to get to market. And lots and lots of data on all of the risks and the benefits as well. That's very important. So if you make it through phase 3, and if it works, a lot of times, you've got endpoints and you've got to get to make it. A lot of people learn things from that, but can't go beyond it. An example is many years ago, we didn't quite make it to the endpoint, and we didn't meet our endpoints. And it was the same time when teplizumab was actually with a company, Macrogenics. They were also doing it for new onset, newly diagnosed. They didn't make it. Tolerix was another company. They didn't make it. So all of us kind of went away, but that's on another slide coming up. So I'll just explain what can happen with that. So phase 4 are post-market approvals, and you don't see that all the time. Sometimes it's mandated by the FDA, maybe if you've got more risks and all, but in phase 4, they're really tracking safety and effectiveness, long-term effectiveness in thousands of people. So sometimes mandated, but not very often. So you don't see it all the time. These are more observational studies, so a little easier to run. Okay, next slide, please. So why should people participate in a clinical study? Actually, there are a lot of good reasons. The first thing I want to say, it's not one of my bullet points, but is that I try to tell other healthcare providers, see it as a method of treatment, really. So I try to tell other diabetes educators, please at least mention it to people, let them know about it, and they can decide. Because not only do you have studies in drugs and all, but that's how we've gotten to where we are with the things that we have for diabetes technology today. So it can really help you as well, and it really can be a form of treatment. So people can look at it that way. Another thing is just additional eyes on you. A lot of our research centers, they're not just you do have a lot of academic centers, but you have others. But a lot of these are key opinion leaders in the field. And when you've got very smart endos, you can ask questions. You get more diabetes self-management education. I mean, I learned a lot. I remember at NIH, my daughter was in a study. She was in many studies. That's how I really got to participate in all this. And I remember that this researcher saying to me, Dr. Routh said, they just discovered something about Gila monster spit. Well, that went on to be GLP-1s and stuff. So, I mean, it's fascinating and it's neat. There's so many neat things about it. Learning about, Ryan, go ahead.
When I love your point about just getting extra attention and more eyes on you. That has been my experience in participating in clinical trials. It's really, you get like a whole another several layers of additional expert care and I really see that as a great benefit in my case.
Yeah, no, it was for me. It was for my daughter. She went on to become what she became and all the things that she did, and even had her shadowing an endocrinologist that we work with for a long time at NIH. I was hoping she'd want to become an endo. She didn't. She became a writer instead. But I mean, the experiences they're really something. Yeah. So altruistic benefits for the whole worldwide type 1 community. People don't participate, we're not going to get anywhere. That's why we are least as far as we are so far. But we need to go a lot farther to really get a cure for everybody out there who's had it. And I'll tell you, I was there when it was the Edmonton protocols, and we were told, everybody's been told, I'm sure you remember the times, that a cure's around the corner. It's just a few years. Well, we believe that. Well, those years have gone on and on. And it's because type 1 is a very complex disease. But you have to have people to participate in the trials, and they have to know about them. So that's another big thing. Satisfaction comes with knowing you're contributing something really important, and it's going to help you. And wow, the benefits, if this works for you, that's terrific. Okay, next slide, please. So some other considerations, just so people know, I think clinical trials, many times they get a bad rap because of the history and just trying to get people in and not caring enough about the subject. So today, there are many, many regulations, safety regulations for them. I mean, long informed consents, patient rights. You hear about a patient's bill of rights, just even if you go into the hospital or do things, or you sign your HIPAA, or you sign all kinds of stuff. But for clinical trials, it's huge. And our US FDA and the European EMA, because our study is also in Europe, in 8 countries in Europe. I mean, they're extensive. You are really watched carefully with these. And then there are individual ethics committees, IRB, institutional review boards, and a data safety monitoring group. You always have those in trials. So it's an independent board. They can be unblinded with certain things. They, look at everything completely unbiased. And so there are a lot of eyes on you as well, taking care of these things. And then financial compensation. Yes, some people are just in trials for, I don't think really in our type 1 community it's like that, but there are smaller trials, there are different kinds of trials. But yes, you are compensated for the time it's taking you in travel. And we have people that travel a long way to come to our sites because we just don't have enough in the US and around the world where everybody is. So that's taken into consideration. And you are free to leave any clinical trial at any time. That's spelled out in the beginning. So many kinds of trials out there. You don't just think of, I think the words studies and trials are used interchangeably. I used to think of studies more, there are mental health studies and ones that others are doing, which they need people for as well. All kinds of behavioral studies. We've got wonderful people working in this field with, everything you have to deal with just living with type 1. And then all the way to the more involved clinical trials, cell therapy, medical devices, everything that's down here, and all stages of life, pregnancy, pediatric, adult, elderly. So there are many opportunities to be in trials and all different ones out there. But people just don't know about them. That's the main thing. So that's my job. And that's what I do as a U.S. site relations and patient recruitment lead for Diamyd. And I've done it with other studies. So it's just getting the word out. Awareness is really important. Next slide. Thank you. So I want to give you an example of a current phase 3 trial, the one I'm working on with a Swedish biopharm, small Swedish biopharm company that's got a lot of motivation and passion behind it. It was founded by a dad of a type 1 daughter. Then he went on to have a granddaughter with type 1 as well, too. But Anders, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's wonderful. If you ever go on our website, you can see the little video with him talking about how he started all this. I tell people he started when he told me when I joined the company many years ago, our trial didn't make it, that phase 3 Diaprevent, when there were 3 new onset studies at that point. But I kept in touch with them and did different things over the years in research and things for medical devices and diabetes and other things. And then came back to do this one. And what's neat is that we got a chance to come back. When we didn't make it then, the company went down to like 5 people. We'd had the biggest tie-up in Scandinavia with Johnson & Johnson. We were all excited, just didn't quite make it. But we learned from that. We learned what can be done so that you can come back and make it better. And we got a second chance. A lot of things don't. Something that my daughter was in never got to come back, and they really believed at NIH and this researcher in Houston that this could have gone somewhere and never got the chance to, right? It's a huge effort, multi-million-dollar effort to do trials. So there are things out there that have not been able to come back. And now they're looking at things, other things from other autoimmune diseases, and we're doing things. We've realized some of that and other new onset studies and things, but there are many things out there. It's really a long, laborious process. So we got to come back and we learned from the meta-analysis of all the previous trials, because there have been over 1,300 people who've had our GAD investigational drug, that it worked in a certain genotype of people, which was about 40 or 50%, almost half of all type 1s. So we are only targeting them, which makes it a great challenge for recruitment. But we're going to have a lot more info about the genetics of type 1 people are interested in. And just hope we can get more in it, because we've been able to screen a lot, but to find them is hard. So we're in different places around the world, and we are learning a lot of things about certain places where you have more of these genetics. We give it directly into the immune system through a lymph node, directed, ultrasound guided. Really interesting. They do it in allergy and oncology fields. And I think we're going to see more medication delivered that way because you give a smaller dose. It's fascinating. Anyway, I won't get into all that, but we're doing things different. And of course, the goal is to preserve beta cells, your own insulin production. We are stopping the beta cell attack as long as they have positive GAD, and then they are screened at our sites. We have 12 sites in the United States. So eligibility, 12 through 28 years old within 6 months of a new type 1 diagnosis. Enrollment deadline is the end of 2025. It's only 2 more months. So I don't want to make too much of a pitch just to please. There is a website there, or be in the chat and whatever, if you know new onsets. There are a lot of good studies out there and other new onsets and things, but this is one that is very targeted specifically and Of course.
We'll be sure to share this information out in the
Feel a certain way about it. I'm glad we could come back. We really hope it makes it this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be sure to share this information out in the follow-up email and in the recording as well. And so this was a great example, but I'm going to switch to your next slide, which you list a few sources where people can find more information about other trials too.
Yes, please. So for type 1 studies, these are just 3 of my favorite. The Children with Diabetes Weekly newsletter, I think it's called the Weekly now. They have a really good place there. They'll put like the new studies, and then you hit studies or something, there's an arrow there, and it'll go behind to another page with all the other studies. And they just have nice little listings to make it easy for you. You can go on the Breakthrough T1D website or old JDRF one, and what they have is something where you can put in, where you are or what kind of trial, and it will filter through directly for you and get you exactly what you're looking for, whether it's something having to do with complications or new onset or ages or whatever. Then just clinicaltrials.gov has been a website well known by many people for many years. All the clinical trials, thousands and thousands and thousands are listed there, and they do have a filter. You can use that as well. But the only other thing I have to say, the only slide I forgot here that's really important is I wanted to have a big, so you can imagine a big slide that says 0.2%, because only the reason more people are not in clinical trials around the world, type 1, type 2, doesn't matter, everywhere, is because healthcare providers, doctors are not telling their patients about them, okay? And it's an actual fact from research that they've done. 0.2%, that's really small, of healthcare professionals tell their patients about trials.
So what do you think we can do as people living with diabetes? Do you suggest that we maybe ask our healthcare team,
please,
if they know of any studies that we might be good, potentially good matches for, things like that?
You can do that, but I'll be honest, a lot of them may not know or don't tell you. There are different things going on there. There have been some before, other doctors who don't want to tell others because they're afraid they might lose that patient. Sorry, I have to say this, but if they feel that way, I mean, maybe you'd want to be with somebody else who is up on the latest. Sorry, and all of you are smart and have been around with type 1 for a long time. But honestly, I mean, I think people need to put a lot of effort into, trying to find best endocrinologists out there who are up on the latest. But I think encouraging them to, let them know about trials about, and are they aware of them? But we are trying, and I will be in 2026, once we get this trial recruited, we're trying to do a lot more to enhance awareness of type 1 clinical trials. Actually, I think it's okay for me to say Breakthrough is going to be doing a research congress this year in Philadelphia in about a year, next October, at the Philadelphia Convention Center, just because they've realized how important this is. So we're going to be working with them and with others to do more. We just have to get the word out. So yes, you should ask your doctor, healthcare professionals, do you know of trials? But when they don't, you may have to educate them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Elna, thank you for sharing all of that and giving us some background. Mary Jane, I'm going to shift over to you. The Diabetes Link is doing a lot of work around helping raise awareness for and about clinical trials in diabetes. And also there's a lot of resources that you guys are pulling together to help us make sense of what we're seeing. So yeah, please take it away.
I'm excited to talk to you guys more about research. So just real quick, in case you haven't heard of the Diabetes Link, formerly the College Diabetes Network, we're a nonprofit that specifically serves young adults with diabetes, but also if you're a young adult at heart, we still serve you. So 18 to 30-ish, and we offer peer support programs, both online and in person, resources, which is what we're going to talk about today, and a lot of cool leadership opportunities and connections. So that is the fastest elevator pitch I can do because I want to get into the good stuff. So I think Elna did an awesome job explaining, why is research important and what does it look like to get involved. So I want to take this a step further and talk about what does this look like for you and how do you as an individual decide how you want to participate. So before you even do anything, You have to think about what your why is. So maybe your life goal is to see a cure for diabetes. I know for me, that's not, I mean, that is the case. But I think what research interests me is, how can I make life better right now while we're working towards that? So that might be my why. Your why might also be diabetes stinks and I want $250 for doing this thing for a month. And that's okay too. And there's a whole range of why things might matter to you. And I think no matter what, being part of the science that helps move the needle is huge. And that actually makes you an advocate. You also want to consider what phase of a trial you're comfortable with. I won't get into this because Elna did an awesome job explaining it, but if it might be scary to be the first human that a new medication or technology is tested on, that's okay. Wait a few phases and then jump in. And then just consider the risks versus rewards, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And there are a lot of places to find studies. I think one that I'll mention that we didn't talk about before is Thrivable. And what I like about this site is if you go to their website, you fill out your information. Here's my type of diabetes, what type of medication I'm using, and they will actually reach out to you directly when you qualify for a study. So it's a little bit more of a passive way to get involved. So things will come to you as they're available, and you don't have to be scrubbing the internet every day for a study. Also, a lot of major medical centers like Barbara Davis, Jocelyn, they're doing studies, so that's another place to look. And healthcare providers, maybe we can do better than the 0.2%, but work in progress. So once you've found your study, these are the wrong way. They're going to screen you for it to make sure that you are properly qualified and that you are as good of a fit as you think you are for the study. So inclusion criteria might mean we're only accepting people with type 1 diabetes, so you're good. Exclusion criteria might be we need folks who have an A1C above 7.5. Maybe you're thriving right now and that doesn't work for you. So that's kind of how they'll weed through all of the people who are interested in participating to make sure that you're the right fit. And if you are, then the next step is going through an informed consent. It's really important to understand the purpose behind the study, what the risks are if you might experience any side effects, what you would have to expect, whether that's going into an office for lab visits, any kind of procedure. And granted, trials have such a large variety of what it might entail, so this will be a little bit different for everything. You'll understand the length of the study. Some are very short, and some will monitor you for months or years or however long they need to. And like Elna said, the most important thing that they'll tell you during your informed consent is that you can withdraw at any time. You are not being held hostage. Even if you participated to a certain extent, that's still really helpful and you still did an awesome thing. And if it's not for you, you know that, and that's great. You made the best decision for you. Okay, so what about when you are actually doing the thing? I think there are a lot of pros and cons, and again, generalizing it can sometimes be tough. But some of the pros will be trying something new and exciting, whether that's, a new insulin pump or CGM or a new medication. You get to try that at no cost, like Scott said, with lots of extra monitoring and support that you might not have during your normal appointments. And again, moving that needle to improve care for everyone else. The cons, you might not know the side effects, or you might experience side effects even if you know what they are, which could make you feel uncomfortable. And there's also the possibility of receiving a placebo, meaning you're not actually getting the treatment or therapy. So I know my cousin was actually just in a trial. She has kind of a rare nerve disease, and she was really, really nervous about receiving a placebo because she's been waiting years and years to actually qualify for a study. And what's great is she definitely didn't get the placebo. They can't tell her that, but she could tell based on how her body responded. But now the thing that she has to consider, and that's something that you would want to consider, is what would it feel like after you had this cool new treatment or technology or therapy that was really helpful? How would it feel going off of that? I think that's just something like on the mental health side of things to prepare for and have conversations about. And then kind
Jane,
of the
can you talk a little bit more about that? And I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's a great point that I didn't really think about until you just mentioned it. So let's say you participate in a trial, you're on the experimental arm, you're getting the actual therapeutic treatment or the treatment that they're studying. And then even if they find that everything works well, there's usually a pretty significant gap of time between when those results are, finalized before then it would be available for consumers on the market, right? That's what you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this could look like a lot of different things, especially considering, what phase it's in. Maybe if you're in phase 4 later trials, you might have access to it sooner than you think. But, FDA approval, making sure everything is safe does take a lot of time. So I what I recommend, but I'm also happy to have anyone else chime in here, is just really considering kind of like coping strategies and alternatives and what that aftermath might look like, whether that's meeting with a mental health professional to talk about this is what my experience was and it's really great. And now I'm frustrated because I don't have it. And I'm hopeful that it'll be accessible to me in the future. It's just a lot to manage at once, on top of all the stuff we already manage. So I think that's one option. And again, I'm not an official medical professional, but there are certain circumstances where you can use things off label and try and figure out, are there kind of other areas where I might be able to experience something similar? And the example that's coming to mind for me is GLP-1 medications. I know they've had a couple studies and they're working on a couple new ones for folks with type 1. And it's definitely a hot conversation right now for people who are interested in using them. So, yeah, hopefully that answered your question, but definitely something we could keep talking about. Cool. Okay, and then wrapping up, once the study's over, what the heck happens? So, as I mentioned, studies will have some amount of a follow up period. It might just be weeks, months, longer, depending on what it is, just to make sure that, they're continuing to assess the efficacy, making sure that anything that you might expect to happen is happening. And they'll let you know about follow up during the informed consent. So you won't be like, why are they calling me again? And I also just want to highlight the impact. And I think we're going to talk a lot about this today. We wouldn't have any of these medical advancements if it wasn't for people participating in these trials. Research is something that makes you an advocate and a leader in the community. And I just do not want anyone to miss that point because it is a huge deal. Okay, and then this giant slide, I just want to mention, so we are coming out with a whole set of resources all about innovation and research at the diabetes link. They're not out yet, so you just got a little sneak peek, but they'll be coming out in December, and we're going to talk about things like representation, what does a career in research look like, why does all type of research matter, and also have perspectives from those who have been in a trial, who are working on trials, just to see from all different angles kind of what that's like. And if you're interested in any other resources, I did throw a QR code up there because we have lots of other topics. But yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to let me know.
Touching on, your point about just making a difference, I remember participating in the Baqsimi trials, and Baqsimi is a form of glucagon, a rescue medication for severe low blood sugars. And there's just something that feels really neat about having that product as a consumer in my medical toolkit, and knowing that that I was a part of helping to get that out to the world. So it also ties back into Elna's point about that altruistic benefit as well. Yeah. I'm also glad that you mentioned representation, and that's a great segue, Grace and Jordan, over to some of the great work that Diversity in Diabetes focuses on. And you guys focus on a lot more than just representation in clinical trials, but that is an important aspect of the mission and the organization. So I'm going to go ahead and get your slides up, and you guys can take it away as I work on getting your slides on the screen.
Okay, sounds good. I'll start first and then Jordan will share some thoughts and ideas with us. But Diversity in Diabetes is a nonprofit, or also known as DID, and was created to make sure that people of color are seen, heard, and represented because representation matters in every part of the diabetes community. And our mission is really to empower people of color living with diabetes through education, awareness, community, and to push for more inclusive research, right? Those clinical trials, support, make people aware of these trials, partner with people who are doing these trials, thinking about language, right? That matters, imagery that matters and truly reflects all the faces of diabetes. And so through our work, whether it's the People of Color Living with Diabetes Summit or virtual support groups, community events, we're really working to bridge the gap that has existed for generations. So on the next slide, we get into history, trust, and trauma. I love this quote. Jordan actually found this quote, and it's such a great quote. The roots of mistrust are not irrational; they are historical. And so, it is a history of broken trust between healthcare and communities of color. For many Black and Brown individuals, skepticism towards healthcare and research isn't about non-compliance. It's about lived experiences, and it's, what's been done to our communities, not with them. So often, and I think people are very familiar with the Tuskegee syphilis study, where Black men were deceived and denied treatment for decades. There was the sterilization of Puerto Rican women in the mid-1900s, when nearly a third of childbearing women age were sterilized without consent as part of population control policies, which is just unreal, to Henrietta Lacks, whose cells were taken without consent, but went on to revolutionize modern medicine. So these are all painful examples of how entire communities were exploited under the guise of research and public health. And even today, we still see the effects of, who's represented and who's not. Higher rates of diabetes complications among Black and Brown Hispanic populations, amputations, that are preventable, lower trust in healthcare institutions, fewer opportunities or benefits from new therapies like continuous glucose monitors or GLP-1s were mentioned. So I think when people don't see themselves reflected in the data and in their providers or in programs built to help them, they disengage, right? And it's not because they don't care, but it's because they don't feel seen. That's why Diversity in Diabetes, we exist, right? To help rebuild that trust. That's part of our goal. Change the narrative from, one trauma and mistrust to one of representation and partnership, right? And we can't rewrite the past, but we can learn from it. And going forward, help build transparency, empathy, representation. And, it's not about just checking a box, right? It's this foundation for trust, engagement, better outcomes. When people feel seen and heard, they participate, they can thrive. And that's what we hope to do with Diversity in Diabetes. And I know Jordan is going to share some additional ideas and thoughts.
Yeah. Scott, if you can go to the next slide. So I want to start just by giving credit where it's due. So from the discovery of insulin to developing glucose monitors and insulin pumps, research about type 1 has made incredible progress. And without it, without these milestones, so many of us that are living with type 1 would not be here today, or managing in the ways that we are. So, as a fellow type 1, a healthcare practitioner and a researcher, I'm extremely grateful for those milestones and for what has been done up to this point. However, I think it's also okay to hold that gratitude while still acknowledging that, the people who helped shape those breakthroughs haven't always reflected the experiences of everyone living with type 1. So, as Grace mentioned, there's a history as it relates to Black and Brown and Indigenous people here in the US where, they may not trust research, they may not trust the medical system, they may not trust science. But the unfortunate part is, like, as people living with type 1, we kind of have to in a lot of ways. So most of the type 1 studies and clinical trials in the past have mainly included white, middle or upper class participants, and people of color, those with lower income, and others who face barriers to healthcare were and are often left out. It's important to note that leaving out marginalized groups may not have been intentional, but it has made the research more feasible by designing studies for those easiest to reach, as opposed to really trying to gather the full lived experience that would lead to a full picture of type 1 diabetes. So, so again, I know earlier we kind of talked about the difference between studies and clinical trials. And I think, yes, we absolutely have to acknowledge that there are differences in those, but whether it's a clinical trial or a study on mental health or whatever it might be, there is a significant lack of representation as it relates to people of color living with type 1.
And how does that translate into, and Grace, feel free to jump in here too, but I'm imagining that when we're studying these new medicines or therapies or treatments or approaches on a population that doesn't reflect the actual population in the real world, that the results may be a little misleading. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that translates into the actual medicines that we're using out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's these clinical trials and studies, these are the things in research that guide treatment, whether it's pharmacological treatment or like clinical treatment, right? So, it's really, it can have a significant impact on, potential, access, right? How to even access some of the resources, some of the medication, some of the interventions that are available. But, I think within that access, there's, cost, there's, knowledge, right? The resource of knowledge and how other healthcare providers are even, or if they're even aware of some of these other, treatments. So, and even that, right? Like where a healthcare provider is geographically, that has an influence on what their patients can learn and understand about what resources are available to them. So, there's a lot of different factors here that that play into this. But, I think one of the biggest messages I have about this is that our voices matter. Everybody's voice matters in terms of type 1 research, but particularly as it relates to people of color and representation, our voices matter, our experiences matter. And without those experiences, without the questions that we might have about clinical trials, and actually engaging in conversations with these, with pharma companies, researchers, whoever it might be, those questions are necessary in order to make the changes needed to make sure that these clinical trials and studies are addressing the needs of everybody that is impacted by type 1, as opposed to, the more, again, the easier or more feasible groups to be able to access. So this is kind of my call to action, I guess, for everybody. So for researchers and industry, I think it means that we, as a researcher, we need to go above and beyond in terms of recruiting more diverse participants. And that's going to start with like trust building, right? And involving those communities within the design of the studies, paying participants fairly for their experiences, and being open and transparent about how the results are used. And again, those, the risks and benefits. And then, for those of us living with type 1, it means that, again, knowing your story and your experiences matter. The way our care is managed is guided by the research that is done. So, if we're not participating, we're really losing out. We're losing out in the experience to change and shape the trajectory of diabetes care. But again, acknowledging that trust and the history of that mistrust, I think it's really important that we are in positions where we are seeking out these clinical trials and definitely asking those questions of the folks that are involved, in charge of these trials, so that you have a better understanding of what is happening and what feels best to you.
May I interject here? I just want to say one point. What is nice, Jordan, is that the FDA is now mandating there must be ethnic diversity in clinical trials in the U.S. They've talked about it for a long time, and they were working towards it. But actually, in the beginning of this year, it's now a mandate. So there are companies in place that are trying to put more emphasis on that. We're doing more with the Hispanic community. We have 2 IRB approved. We've got everything is in Spanish for our sites that, get Hispanic patients as well. But we're trying to do more to the underserved community, and especially going out to clinics and places. So I welcome from you or anyone else other, places to get out to and get the word out. And also with just making trials more accessible to people. I worked on a virtual trial one time. It's a great way to do some of them if you can. It was like a pre-trial for a larger pharma company decide if they wanted to do it about the interest, but just different ways of doing trials. There's some smaller studies where people send, people to do labs and nurses to people's homes. I think we're moving in that direction because the way we do trials today, it's really not sustainable. And that's why a lot of good things don't end up coming back or making it to market, because it's just such a huge, huge effort. So education, meeting people where they are. I remember doing stuff with African American. We went to churches. I went to a lot of African American churches because that's where the people were, and they were really interested. This wasn't actually for trial. It was just type 2 and diabetes education. But some of them asked about trials and studies and things to be. And you have to meet people where they are, also where they are in their understanding, or their fears, or whatever it is. So I think we're moving in that direction. Now it's mandated by the FDA, but it's got quite a ways to go. So that's why realizations like diversity and diabetes are really important.
Yeah, those are great points, Alma. I mean, a lot of trials are held in large academic centers, right? They're far away from these underrepresented populations and communities. And, if there's a lack of transportation or support, right, like that goes out the window. You brought up labs, right? So sometimes there's strict eligibility based on labs, comorbidities, or insurance requirements. It's unintentionally excluding people with higher rates of chronic conditions as a result of some of those eligibility and inclusion requirements. Education is huge for sure.
It is. They are trying to change that, and a lot of, good study. They now have to look at that and do more to include more diverse populations. So I think, again, we will see more, and number one is awareness.
Totally. Yeah. And even participants and the researchers that are coordinating and the clinicians, it's also important to have providers and researchers that look like these different cultures, right? And understand their culture as well.
I was just going to say, I think, I think the other piece of that too is involving, diverse, you know, diverse people
Yes.
in the studies, just like I mentioned
Yes.
before, like in the study design, in the recruitment efforts, right? Like there's that, again, that's what's going to help build that trust that is likely
agree.
lacking. So again, it's my unapologetic call to action is here, it's there.
I get it.
And I know there's so much more that needs to be done, but at least, getting it out there is important.
Jordan, can you talk a little bit more about? I love the point that you brought up about investing in trust building. It's not just enough to, make some of these efforts to include these diverse audiences when we haven't invested in building that trust, which is that to me as a layperson sounds like a very kind of a long-term investment, something that takes a lot of work up front, and that can also be a little bit hard to measure. To share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting that, Elna, you bring up that, the FDA is requiring, representation. And it's like, okay, well, but also don't let me get too far into this, but like when you're looking for grants and things like that to conduct research, those things aren't really considered. There isn't a section that you can say, hey, I'm requesting X amount of dollars so that, for some grants, there is something like that. But, I think that, that investment is definitely long term. And again, it is also about bringing people into the space, into that team, into that organization, into that industry to ensure that their experiences as well are being heard and acknowledged and being woven into, the makeup of these trials and these studies. It's extremely important, even like, like you said, Elna, your daughter has type 1, the clinical trial that you were mentioning, their son has type 1 and then or daughter, right? And then their granddaughter has type 1. Like those are extremely important and really, really can help drive, the design, but that's one piece of such a much bigger picture in addressing, the issue of representation and diversity.
I'll give one example so at the Barbara Davis Center, which I'm sure you all know because it's a big hallmark in type 1. I often tell people if you have to be born with type, or or get diagnosed with type 1 if you're around Denver, it's not a bad idea because that's an amazing place. They've got like 4 floors and everything is research in type 1. They got it down to an art when somebody's newly diagnosed. In Sweden, there's a little bit of that too. It's like you get on a slide and you go down and they give you the CGM and this and the education, whatever. But they're lacking in other things. They don't have the glucagon, different things. So every place has its pluses and minuses. But what I love at Barbara Davis is one of our main study coordinators. You have study coordinators kind of run the trial with the PI, who's the principal investigator. She's Hispanic. And she takes care of, so they have a huge Hispanic population, people that come there from Colorado and other neighboring places where you wouldn't think, you think more Hispanics, like we have more of a Hispanic population for a site in Florida or Southern California or in Texas, but right there in Colorado because she's there and gets it and does it. So I agree. I've seen the difference it makes having them. We need more diversity in those running trials as well. And I just have to say one thing that's on the chat. Mila is here, Ferrer. Mila has been, the voice of the Spanish type, Hispanic community for many, many years doing things. She has a son with type 1. She made a good point. She said, we need to highlight the stories of those minorities who have participated. And she's been trying to do that and do that more and has done. She's one of the ones who's done IRB approved or whatever. I don't know if that one was IRB approved, but anyway, in Spanish about our study, does it for others, has worked in this field, and she's very passionate about getting stories out there. So you guys definitely have to connect at some point too, because that is important.
Yeah, thank you, Elna. We're big fans of Mila. Jordan,
I want to ask Mila. Okay, all right, but
yeah.
I hadn't connected with her for a long time and did recently, so I was very happy. But that's a good point about the stories where it's gone well, because then that helps with the trust issue, I think, Jordan.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, Time is flying right by. I want to ask Jordan another question that I think is important. I heard you mention during your presentation, you were very distinctly separating clinical trials and studies. And I realized as you're talking about that I probably am mistakenly using those two phrases and terms almost interchangeably. And I would like to uncover that and clarify that a little bit for myself and our audience.
Yeah, so I think, Elna mentioned it earlier, but with the clinical trial there, it can be with again, like pharmaceuticals, but it can also be with interventions. And the idea is that you're going through these different phases to see the efficacy and the effects of a specific intervention on a group of people. And then with a study, studies we're looking at, you could look at anything mental health related. Really, you're kind of looking at maybe like the impact of something that already exists and is being practiced to see how it is impacting the population. So a lot of people do use them interchangeably. Study particularly is just kind of the broad term. But yeah, so, but either way, right? Like representation is needed in both, clinical trials as well as studies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. And then we have one more slide if you want to just
Yep, I was just going to
Yeah.
ask about that. I wanted to make sure we didn't forget.
So I think, it's important to note, as the folks over Grace and everybody at Diversity and Diabetes was preparing for this presentation, we had a conversation about asking the community what they knew about clinical trials, how they felt about clinical trials. So here were some of the responses. So we asked what comes to your mind when you hear the words clinical trials. Have you ever been invited to do a clinical trial? Why would you not join a clinical trial? So I'm not going to go through all of the responses here, just for time's sake. But again, I think it's really important to acknowledge that like some people just don't even know what they are or that they exist, right? Or how to access them. So that just speaks to really, again, like trusting the organizations that are sharing these clinical trials and knowing that like these clinical trials have been vetted, and that folks feel comfortable enough to actually engage in that first step of like, ooh, I want to know more and see if I qualify. I've had some discussions with Grace and also Casey at DID, and we're talking about some of that right now too. So just really excited to see what comes of this. And I think we need to have a number two
I
session.
voted for that too, and this is an excellent slide. I
Yeah,
wanna
very,
complete
very
that.
informative. I want to
Really.
put your folks, Diversity and Diabetes is a great organization. They have a monthly insulin inclusive like Zoom meetup that happens. I've attended several times. It's fantastic. So let's shift into closing thoughts. And Mary Jane, I'll start with you, and then Elna, and then we'll come back to Diversity and Diabetes, and then I'll do some kind of closing housekeeping, and then we can let people drop off. And again, just a reminder that for anyone who's not familiar with Blue Circle Health, stick around. I'll do a very brief sort of intro and answer any questions. But Mary Jane, go ahead with some closing thoughts.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I think the best thing that you can do is educate yourself on something that you're curious about. So, this is a really awesome first step just towards getting information about what a trial is. Is it something I'm interested in? And I encourage you to take what you learned today, sit with it, and keep digging to see if it's something you'd want to participate in.
Elna, go ahead with your closing thoughts.
Sure. So my closing thought is I'm really glad we did this. I think this is very important. I want to do a lot more about increasing clinical trial awareness, and I'm glad people are interested in this. And yes, the key being awareness, education. It's interesting how this comes at a time too with, as I said, the FDA mandate and the conversation with Jordan there and that wonderful slide. And there is other research out there, but there needs to be more about why people aren't in trials and really educating healthcare professionals. That is going to be something I'm going to work on more of ways we can do that for endos and others at big conferences and things like that going into 2026. That's a bigger thing. But I think just talking in the community wise, what we've started here is important to continue somehow. So we should talk about, Scott, how we can do that with moving on in part 2. And it's interesting, it's coming from, Blue Circle Health helping to start this, to works with underserved population people who need extra help and stuff. So it's wonderful. It's good timing, put it that way.
Yeah, good. And you mentioned that the study you're working on, the recruitment ends very soon. So I want to give you a quick opportunity to plug that website again, let people know where they maybe can learn more. And this study is also going to be listed and available in all of those other resources that Mary Jane and Elna shared. But Elna, please share the website again so people can check it out if they want to.
Sure, and I'll put it. I will also, or Terry, you can, as I'm talking, because I know Terry can put it in there too. It's www.diagnode-3.com. Diagnode for diabetes, and node because it goes into a lymph node. It's not a scary thing. People don't drop out because of that, whatever. It's ultrasound guided. It's no different than people have described as getting your blood drawn or something. It's only 3 injections. So we are just until the end of December. So if you do know newly diagnosed, there are other newly diagnosed studies out there as well, but this one won't be there for very long. And we have had a lot of interest in people, like I said, but we need to screen more to find those who have the specific genotype, which is about half. So anything you can do helping spread the word, I appreciate it, guys. And
great. Yeah, thank you, Elna. All right, and Jordan, Grace sent us a message that she had to drop off. I'm so appreciative that she was able to sneak in a little time with us today to share her thoughts and represent for diversity with diabetes. But I'd like to give you an opportunity to share any closing thoughts that you might have.
Just, again, super grateful to have had this experience. There's a lot of work to be done. That's part of the reason why I was like, hey, let me go back to school and get my PhD, right? Because I experienced just, during my pregnancy, it was very difficult to get answers, right? So I was like, okay, well, let me try to bridge the gap. And I'm definitely not saying that people need to go and get their PhD, but I do think that there are many opportunities for those of us, particularly people of color living with type 1, to get into these spaces and really, ask the questions, make the suggestions so that there are opportunities for more inclusion. And, that will hopefully result in, more robust information and application of, how we're able to manage type 1. Because it's needed.
And Jordan, this is Elna. I'll connect with you separately. I really want to find out what you're doing with pregnancy and the kind of study of pregnancy, because that's important. For a long time, they would not include pregnant women in any trials anywhere. They finally changed that over the years, right? And now there's
barely.
I know, but they're starting, and at least with type 1 as well, right? Because mostly learn from each other, in the community, who's done what, in the books and things there, and the people. But it's starting. So anyway, I will connect with you about that. Maybe on our second one, we have some time, you can talk more about specific stuff you're doing with that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you, panelists and attendees. I know we're a bit over time, so anyone that needs to drop off, including my esteemed panelists, please feel free to drop off at any time. And just thank you so much for our speakers and everyone who joined us today. Thank you for being a part of this important conversation. We hope that you're leaving with a bit of a clearer understanding of what clinical trials are, how to find trustworthy information, and how research continues to really shape the future of type 1 diabetes care. So again, we're deeply grateful to our partners, the Diabetes Link, Diamyd, and Diversity in Diabetes, for collaborating on today's discussion, and for the work that they each do in advancing awareness and inclusion across the T1D community. I'll be sending a follow-up email within the next couple of days with the recording, resources, all the links that we mentioned, and the slide decks, so that you can learn more about everything we talked about today, but also dive in and learn more about these great organizations. So Again, please let us know if you would like another session, a part 2 on the topic. We got some good votes coming in, and we're interested in doing more if you have an appetite for learning more about it. So thank you again for spending part of your day with us and your continued commitment to learning, connecting, and living well with T1D. I want to just promote quickly our upcoming community events. You can learn more about those at bluecirclehealth.org/events to stay up to date with future events. We have a fun cooking class happening on Monday with Rita, where she's going to be demonstrating how to make smoky sweet potato and black bean chili. And then another webinar on Wednesday that is going to talk about aging with type 1 diabetes. Then we also have our English group sessions next Thursday and Friday, and the Spanish session on the following week, the 13th. And just as a quick reminder, while the webinars and classes are open to everyone, the group sessions are only for Blue Circle Health participants. And then again, finally, for anyone here today who may not be familiar with Blue Circle Health, I'm going to share a quick, this 5-minute overview, and then stick around to answer any questions. Again, anyone who has commitments can drop off. Panelists, you're welcome to drop off, or you're also welcome to stay too. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again for the conversation. It's really great. So I'm going to get some Blue Circle Health slides up here pretty quick. Give me just a second. So I'm going to share a quick overview of what Blue Circle Health is all about. Please share any questions you have along the way in the chat, and I'll go through them at the end. And again, this should really only take a few minutes. So people with type 1 diabetes shouldn't have to fight for what they need to live. Blue Circle Health created a free 6-month virtual clinical care, education, and support program so that you can focus on living, not just surviving. Our mission is threefold, and the first point is to learn the best ways to care for people living with type 1 diabetes, to apply those learnings to care for as many as possible, and then to share our learnings to improve type 1 diabetes care everywhere. And Blue Circle Health is made possible thanks to generous funding from the Helmsley Charitable Trust. So what exactly does that mean? Again, we offer a free, flexible program to extend care between visits. Our program is up to 6 months long. It's done entirely virtually over Zoom, text, and phone. You stay connected to your medical homes, and we send regular updates to them as well. Our services are free, regardless of insurance and immigration status. Re-enrollment is possible 1 year from the original enrollment date. And then the program offers really as much or as little support as requested. So you can take advantage of every service we offer or pick just the ones that you need. The graphic on the right side here shows the available services, and I'll describe them in more detail, going counterclockwise, starting with clinical care. So clinical care is exactly what it sounds like. It's visits with an endocrinologist or advanced nurse practitioner. Next is insurance navigation, which is consultation with insurance specialists who can help you understand and maximize any insurance coverage you may have, or help you find insurance coverage if needed. They also help with prior authorizations. And I don't know about your life with diabetes, but my life with diabetes seems to be full of prior authorizations. So it's a pretty special service. Next is diabetes supportive counseling, which offers help with the emotional burden of T1D. We also have case management. So our case managers can help if you're struggling with, say, food, housing, or employment insecurities. We have peer support and community. So in addition to our monthly group sessions, you'll have a dedicated T1D support guide to work with who will help you sort of navigate all the other services and just be there for you if you need someone to talk with. We also have ongoing community events like this and connections to other great type 1 diabetes organizations. One new thing in the community events is we recently launched a new podcast. And so you can find it in Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere that you normally listen to podcasts. And it's called Around the Circle, Living Well with T1D. And I'll include a link to that in the follow-up email as well. Moving around the circle more, education and nutrition. So this is visits with registered dietitians and certified diabetes care and education specialists. And then there are 2 additional programs available within the overall Blue Circle Health program. The first is a prescription assistance program for qualified applicants who need help paying for supplies and medications. The qualification for that is an income level at or below 300% of the federal poverty level. And then the other program is an Intro to CGM, which provides 3 months of free education and access to a CGM for those who have not had reliable access to one before. We are now available in 16 states, with more coming very soon. And we've helped almost 1,000 participants since January of 2024. And so you might be asking, all right, this all sounds great, but how do I get involved? And so our goal is to make it very easy to get involved. The eligibility requirements are not hard to meet. So first of all, you have to have a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes. And note, this is not just newly diagnosed. This is not just underserved. Even the most well-resourced person with type 1 diabetes is usually not getting the care that they need and deserve. So we're really here for you anywhere along your T1D journey. And yes, this does include cases like LADA or pancreatic injury or things like that. You do have to be 18 years or older, so we're only serving adults. You have to be able to speak English and or Spanish. You have to be able to connect and participate in virtual care, and that usually means access to a smartphone or a computer for Zoom video calls. You do have to have a primary care doctor or endocrinologist, or be willing for us to help you connect to one. And then you need to live in a state where we're licensed in, and that list of states, it's growing quickly. So check out our website for the most up-to-date list of available states. And then no current pregnancy, so that we can help with pre-pregnancy and post-pregnancy. But for people who currently are pregnant, you really need that in-person care. So again, the list of states we're available in, it's growing fast. In fact, we've got a couple more launching just next week. So take a look at our website for the most current list of states, and that's bluecirclehealth.org. It is easy to get started. Again, you can get started in just 3 easy steps. Sign up on our website at bluecirclehealth.org. We'll then contact you to create a plan that meets your needs, and then you start your care and support program. I'd like to play a short video from a few of the people who have gone through the program. It's about 3 minutes long. And while that's playing, go ahead and share any questions that you might have in the chat. I'm happy to stick around and answer them.
When I explain it to people, I usually say,
living with type 1 diabetes is pretty burdensome,
complicated. It's really, really tough.
challenging.
Too many ups and downs.
I'm never not thinking about it.
I lose a lot of sleep. It's very emotional.
The only predictable thing about type 1 diabetes is that it's unpredictable.
It makes me feel really vulnerable and afraid. And I don't like feeling afraid and vulnerable with my diabetes.
My daughter was diagnosed when she was 3. If I couldn't afford for both of us to get supplies, I'll just literally take the shirt off my back, take the insulin out of my body and put it to her.
like, it's a battle every day. And insurance shouldn't be such a fight.
I literally spent days on the phone calling the provider, calling the pharmacist, calling the insurance, calling the pre-op company, and then calling all those people again to tell each other what the other one said.
It's like everyone's pointing their fingers at someone else. In the meantime, I'm watching my my supplies dwindle away to nothing.
Like, that's a constant fear, you know?
And so things that feel like a fundamental right are out of reach for many people.
It's just wrong.
A friend of mine on Instagram sent me Blue Circle Health, so I immediately signed up.
Blue Circle Health is a nonprofit with a free clinical care, education, and support program. We deliver our program entirely virtually. It's all telehealth, and it's up to 6 months long.
You get education, you get support, you get assistance navigating insurance. It's phenomenal.
I don't know where I would be right now if I didn't find Blue Circle Health. They picked me up when I was at one of my lowest points.
It's just honestly a godsend.
Felt like they get it. It felt like we're making the change that we should already have.
We were really fortunate to have funding from the Helmsley Charitable Trust to make this possible and create this program and be able to offer it for free.
My life has drastically improved. I have really great insurance. The insurance counselor through Blue Circle was amazing. Not much makes me that emotional, but having to not worry about the financial aspect of that as a single mom who's rebuilding is, it's really comforting. Yeah, I'm crying.
And if Blue Circle Health can get out there and show people that this is the right way, it's the right thing to do. You don't have to go through it alone.
I don't see any questions that came in during my rapid fire presentation, but if you do have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me. A good email address to use is community@Blue Circle Health. That'll get to me as well. But thank you all for attending. Elna, thank you for helping put this together and sharing information. Clinical trials, it's such an important topic. So with that, we'll go ahead and end the session, and I'll be in touch via follow-up email very soon. Thank you.